Hello. So for chapter 1, we'll be learning about economics and basically an overview of economics. The term economy, which we get from economics, comes from the most directly from Old French, right? Meaning management of a household. The French adopted this term from the Latin word economica, economia. Hello. So for this week, we're covering a basic overview of economics. Now, economics is not the study of the stock market, right? And it's not primarily old men sitting around in bow ties forecasting what's going to happen in a given market or the overall economy. Actually, a few economists do that, but that's not the main focus of economics, right? Economics itself is actually the study of people and choices. Right? The famous economist Alfred Marshall defined economics as the study of man and woman in the ordinary business of life. It inquires how a person gets their income and how they use it. Thus, on the one side, it's the study of wealth. On the other, more important side, a part of the study of man and woman. So let's talk a little bit about what else economics is. Economics is an 18-year-old deciding whether or not to go to work or to go to college, and how that affects their future income. Right? Economics is a company deciding whether to produce smartphones or tablets, and how that's influenced by what consumers want to buy. Economics is the government deciding whether to increase the spending when there's a recession, or if it's worth going into debt. Despite what you might think economics is, right? It's not boring, it's not dull. I mean, some of it is, but it's not all like that. I promise, right? Understanding economics can forever change the way you think and solve problems. Now, over the next 11 weeks, it's my job to teach you concepts that will help you understand the world and hopefully make it a better place. No matter who you are, you will be using economics. In fact, you're using economics right now. You made a choice. You made a choice to watch this video. And that means you feel the benefit of watching this video outweighs the costs you might be thinking of, right? You might think there's no cost, but there is. You could easily be watching, say, videos of kiddos, or skaters falling on their faces, or the winner from AGT. Right? You figured the cost of watching this video, right, is more valuable than the cost of those other alternatives. Economists call this your opportunity cost, right? If you're still watching this video, it means that you believe that it's the best use of your time, or you won't be watching it. Now, believe it or not, we already covered 2 concepts of economics, right? The first assumption we made, right, is scarcity. People have unlimited wants, right? Unlimited wants, but limited resources. Time, money, themselves. And second, everything has a cost, right? If these assumptions are true, then we need a way to analyze our choices and get the most from our limited resources, and that's economics. So let's go back to the idea of benefits and costs, right? Every year, 30,000 people die in car accidents. Is there a way to ensure that there'll never be another car accident fatality? Well, yes. We could just close all the roads and get rid of all the cars, right? Force everyone to walk. That would solve the car crash problem, and you decrease the number of deaths, right? If we want to decrease murder, well, let's decriminalize murder, right? If you want to reduce the unethical treatment of elephants, well, just kill off all the elephants, ethically, of course. But before you decide to do that, think about the options for a second, right? Each of these scenarios is absurd because the cost clearly outweighs the benefit, right? Traffic fatalities are high, but we don't prevent them at all costs. Why? Because, first, I don't want to walk home with my groceries or walk to the gym, right? The chance of dying in a car accident on the way to the gym or the way home from groceries is minuscule compared to the overall benefit it provides. Overall, right, individual businesses and countries, they can't have everything, so they're forced to weigh the benefits and the costs of their decisions and to make choices. In the US, for example, right now, we're talking about our budget, right? The U.S. military spending budget is over $600 billion per year. $600 billion. Right? That's close to what the next top 10 countries spend combined. There are a total of 20 active aircraft carriers in the world, and the U.S. has over half of them. Right? And it's building more. Aircraft carriers with 5, 6, 7,000 people on board. The opportunity of those costs of those aircraft carriers could be hospitals, schools, roads, feeding the hungry. So, question then, is the U.S. spending too much money on the military? Should the U.S. focus more on making guns or, say, shoes? Right? That is a choice between weapons and consumer goods. And notice the key word here is or, right? Because limited resources. We can't produce an infinite number of one thing and an infinite number of another good. We don't have an infinite number of workers. We don't have an infinite number of farms, factories, materials. Scarcity means we must make a choice. Now, Dwight Eisenhower, right? He tried to examine this line of thinking back in 1953 with the Cold War. Now, he gave a speech, right? And he said that for military buildup, every gun that is made, right? Every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies the final sense, right? A theft from those who hunger and are not fed, right? Those that are cold and not clothed. This world is spending money alone, right? And it's spending the sweat of its laborers and the genius of its scientists and the hopes of its children, right? So this good time to mention the idea of politics and economics. Now, I am not pushing some sort of liberal anti-military policy or agenda here. In fact, I served 10 years in the United States Army. I was attached to the 2nd Infantry Division and the 1st Cavalry Division, and personally believe, right, military spending to be appropriate. However, I am pointing out that the military spending has an opportunity cost. The resources are not being used for social services like feeding the hungry. This is where your personal agenda, decisions, thoughts, and processes have to come to bear. There is no one right or there is no one wrong, right? But be able to defend your position and defend your ideology. And it has to be known that this fight between capitalism and the free market and socialism is ongoing, right? The computer that you're probably watching this on or the phone is brought to you by capitalism. If you watch the Free to Choose video, the first one at like the 15-minute mark, we're talking about the creation of the pencil. Right? No one brought all these disparate people together to actually create this pencil, or in this case, maybe a laptop or a phone, right? In the private sector of that whole concept, right? But that was brought to you by the capitalism and free market. But being said, right, the security, the laws, the roads, possibly traffic ticket that you got the other day, they come from the government. Conservatives, liberals, they fight over the details, right? But the free market alone cannot solve all of our problems, nor can the government solve all of our problems. Government officials use economic theories to guide public policy, and their effects are widespread across billions of people. Sometimes the theory is flawed, but many times it's not the theory, but the policy itself that's flawed. Economists suggest theories and policies based on theory, right? Supported by data and understanding of incentives. And the idea here is to have the right incentives. Incentives are key, but they can be hard to determine. Think about colleges, for example. If a college gets funding for students, right, for each student they enroll, well, this college has financial incentive to enroll more students, right? But it can backfire because maybe the money gets for graduates, right, can push students through the program without giving them an education, or it only admits students who are through super high test scores, or it can push them to less rigorous majors. There's these concept of incentives has to be thoroughly vetted and thought about, right? But incentives can help solve problems without adding more resources, right? Healthcare. How do we solve this problem with healthcare? How do we incentivize better healthcare for a cheaper cost? Right, the U.S. already spends almost twice as much per person on healthcare, and in many cases, the outcomes are not as good. So, economists might say the U.S. rather than spending more money, right, we need to make sure that insurers, hospitals, doctors, and patients have incentives to produce the most effective care possible at the lowest possible cost. Being that if you mess up the incentives, the policy isn't going to work. Back in Vietnam, right? Vietnam was back before Vietnam was under French colonial rule. That's what I'm trying to say. The French regime issued a bounty on rats because there's a rat problem. So, let's see, how do we get rid of this rat problem? Well, they wanted to incentivize people catching and killing rats. So they said, we'll give you money for handing in rat tails, right? Because rats themselves, just whole rats, are just too much cumbersome, too much of a problem. So we just want the tails, right? You kill the cat, you cut the tail, you give us the tail, we'll give you money for it. Sounds feasible, right? Sounds plausible, sounds okay. But what happened? Well, the people actually would catch the cats, or catch the rats, cut their tails off, and release the rats so they can make more babies, so they can catch those babies and cut off those tails and get money for the rat tails. It made the problem worse, right? This idea of perverse incentives we'll talk about later when we talk about like the 2008 financial crisis, right? But speaking of the 2008 financial crisis, right, a frequent question is, why did economists predict the 2008 financial crisis? Or why can't they agree on what the government should do after the financial crisis? So, this comes to a key point here. The idea that there's a difference between macroeconomics and microeconomics. Right? Specifically, these are complaints against macroeconomics, right? Macro studies the economy as a whole, right? And not as individual people, right? It looks at employment, inflation, interest rates, government spending, and growth. Macro answers questions like, will unemployment rise if there's an increase in taxes? Or will the increase in money supply boost output? Or what will happen to the U.S. economy if the European economy slows down? Macroeconomics gets a lot more airtime in the news these days because they predict the direction of the overall economy and work with the media, right? But less than half the economists, right, are macroeconomics economists, macroeconomists. The whole other side is what we're learning here is microeconomics. But it asks different questions, right? How many workers should we hire to maximize profit? Or if our main competitor releases their product in May, when's the best time to release our product? Or which is better for fighting climate change, right? A gas tax or increase in fuel efficiency? Those are microeconomic questions. They're not nearly as interesting or newsworthy or incendiary sometimes, right? But they're all critical questions and crucial questions that have to be answered. So hopefully, throughout the course of this term of this course, you'll learn to answer those questions. Okay, so again, for chapter 1, concepts, right? I want you to think about being able to define economics, right, and the features of economic perspective, right? I want you to be able to describe the role of economic theory in economics and analyze how economic growth and international trade increase consumption possibilities. Think about terms such as scarcity, right? Limited resources, opportunity costs. So, work through the problems this week, watch the videos, watch the PowerPoints, watch the narrated PowerPoints. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me or post in the discussion board. Or if you can get online Wednesday night for the live session, feel free to ask that at that time. All right, have a great week.